Look, everyone is calling this India-US trade deal a normal trade negotiations. But honestly, that is just most boring way to look at it. Because this is not just about tariffs. This is not just about customs duty. And this is definitely not about America suddenly discovering that India is a beautiful democracy with yoga, chai, and very hardworking engineers. No, 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 no. This is about money, supply chains, China, manufacturing, rare earth, oil, defense, technology, and the one thing that actually runs the world business. Because let's be honest, in geopolitics, everybody gives moral speeches, everybody talks about peace, democracy, human rights, religion, ideology, national security, but behind every war, every trade war, every sanctions, every diplomatic hug, and every angry press conference, there is one simple question: who is making money, who is losing money, and who controls the system? And right now, America has a problem, a very expensive problem. For 30 years, America enjoyed the greatest business model in modern history: design in California, manufacture in China, consume across the world, print dollars in Washington, and give lectures to everyone else on free markets. Beautiful arrangements, almost spiritual. But then, one fine day, America woke up and realized, oh, we have outsourced our factories, our supply chains, our electronics, our rare earth dependencies, our industrial confidence, and half our middle class jobs to the same country we now call our biggest strategic rival. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And now the same America that preached globalization is suddenly saying trusted partners, which in normal English means China became too powerful and now we need India. America does not need India because it suddenly fell in love with our culture. America needs India because China became too dangerous. Europe became too confused, Pakistan became too useless, and Bangladesh became too unstable. That is a real global calculation. Now look at the timing. The US trade representative is coming to India for trade talks. The target is an interim deal, and this is happening when the world is openly moving from free trade to power trade, from efficiency to security, from cheap goods to trusted supply chains. Because after COVID, Ukraine, Red Sea tensions, rare earth restrictions, semiconductor wars, and tariff battles, the world has understood one thing: the cheapest supplier is not always the safest supplier. And this is exactly where India enters the story. Because under Prime Minister Narendra Modi, India's foreign policy has moved from old style moral nervousness to hard nosed bargaining. Old India used to say, "What will the world think?" New India asks, "What is India getting?" And this one line explains why India is no longer behaving just like a junior partner. Just see the numbers. India's total exports in financial year 25-26 are estimated around $860 billion. Yes, $860 billion. Not a small struggling economy waiting outside some Western office for approval. India's merchandise exports alone in May 2026 were around $45.2 billion. Imports were around $73.4 billion and the trade deficit was around $28.2 billion. So yes, India still imports a lot, especially energy and gold. But India is also selling more aggressively, negotiating more confidently, and building more capacity. Now come to India-US trade. In 2025, goods trade between India and the US was around $149.4 billion. US exports to India were around $45.6 billion. US imports from India were around $103.8 billion. And America had a goods trade deficit of about around $58.2 billion with India. So when America talks to India about trade, please don't imagine some generous uncle distributing opportunity. This is not charity. This is self-interest wearing a suit. America wants access to India's market, India's talent, India's consumer, India's manufacturing base, India's defense purchases, India's digital economy, and most importantly, India's geopolitical position against China. And India also wants something very clear: better markets, better market accessibility, better tariffs, better technology, better investments, more manufacturing shift, more jobs, more exports, and more respect. Because friendship is good, but invoice is even better. In global politics, there are no permanent friends, only permanent interests. And India has finally learned to say, We are friends with everyone, but the bill will be calculated in Bharat's interest. Now, the real shock is this: India is not rising only because of speeches. India is rising because the base has changed. In 2014, India had 74 operational airports. By 2025, that number had gone to around 164. National highways went from around 91,000 kilometers in 2014 to around 146,000 kilometers by 2025. Operational access controlled high speed corridors went from just 93 kilometers to over 3,000 kilometers. That is not cosmetic development, that is logistics power. In mobile manufacturing, India went from a country where only around 26% of the phones sold in India were made in India in 2014-15 to a country where over 99% of the phones sold in India are made in India. And mobile phones production has gone from around 18,000 crore rupees to more than 5 lakh crore rupees. This is the difference between being a market and becoming a manufacturing base. UPI is just another monster story. From just around 2 crore transactions in the first year of 2016-17 to more than 24,000 crore transactions in 25-26, and value from around 0.07 lakh crore rupees to around 314 lakh crore rupees, that is not digitization, that is financial earthquake. Defense exports have gone from almost nothing serious earlier to 23,000 crore rupees in financial year 24-25, a 34 times jump from 13-14 level, and defense production crossed 1.5 lakh crore rupees. So the country that was once mocked for importing everything is now trying to sell defense equipments to the world, slowly and imperfectly, but seriously. India's foreign exchange reserves are around $681 billion, and even after global shocks, oil price pressures, currency pressures, and geopolitical tensions, India still sits with one of the world's largest reserve cushions. Poverty data also shocks people because, according to the World Bank linked estimates, extreme poverty in India fell sharply from 16.2% in 11-12 to about 2.3% in 22-23, lifting around 171 million people out of extreme poverty. Now, of course, there is still poverty, there is still inequality, there are still problems, but anyone who says nothing has changed is either not reading data or is professionally depressed. If emotions made countries rich, Pakistan would be superpower. If slogans created exports, Islamabad would be giving loans to the IMF. But money does not care about noise. Money goes where there is stability, scale, infrastructure, digital systems, leadership, and execution. And that is why India matters. Now compare India's direction with a neighborhood. Pakistan's state model has become almost comic. Exports instability, import loans, and then deliver lectures on dignity. The television studios have more confidence than their central bank. Their strategic depth has become financial depth. And every few months, they discover a new way to blame India for a problem created in Islamabad. Bangladesh had a strong government story. Let's give credit where due is. But if political instability rises, investors don't sit and meditate. They quietly look for a safer ground. And that is exactly why India's stability premium matters. This is not hatred, this is business analysis, because capital is not emotional. Capital is very practical. Capital says, show me roads, ports, power policy, courts, currency stability, labor, scale, consumption, and leadership. And India is not perfect, but India is proving on almost every big metric that matters for long-term power. Now, let's come back to America, because America's hypocrisy is also a case study. For decades, they told the world, don't protect your industries, open your markets. Free trade is good. Then, when China became too strong, suddenly free trade needed national security filters. When developing countries gave subsidies, it was market distortion. When America gives subsidies for chips, clean energy, and manufacturing, it becomes patriotic industrial policy. Very convenient, very elegant, very American. So India must smile, shake hands, take photos, say all the correct diplomatic lines, and then negotiate like a bania with a calculator in one hand and national interest in the other. Modi's India has done one of the most important things. It has made India transactional without making India isolated. India talks to America, buys oil from Russia, competes with China, engages Europe, leads the global south, works with the Gulf, builds Quad, joins BRICS, and still says, boss, we will decide based on our interest. And that is not confusion, that is multi alignment. The old world wanted India to choose sides. The new India says, we choose India. If America gives technology, we talk. If Russia gives energy, we talk. If Europe gives market access, we talk. If China creates pressure, we build capacity. This is not diplomacy textbook language. This is business with a flag. And that is why this India US trade deal matters. Because if India plays this correctly, it can pull more factories from China, get better access to American markets, and push Indian exports higher. Bring advanced technology, deepen defense and electronic manufacturing, and turn India from just a consumer market into a production system. The real dream is not just $5 trillion GDP, not just stock market highs, not just one more airport inauguration. The real dream is an Indian economic system where Indian companies manufacture for the world. Indian coders build for the world. Indian port ships to the world. Indian payment system inspire the world. Indian defense products protect friendly countries, and Indian diplomacy protects Indian business. Great powers are not built by asking for respect. Great powers are built by becoming impossible to ignore. America understands this now. China understood it long back. Europe still finding the meeting room. Pakistan is finding the next loan tranche. Bangladesh is finding political balance, and India is finding scale. But let's be honest, India still has a lot to do. We need faster courts, better manufacturing, better skilling, cleaner cities, stronger universities, lower logistic costs, and less bureaucracy, because nationalism without productivity is just noise, but nationalism plus productivity becomes power. So when you hear that America and India are negotiating a trade deal, don't see it as one news item. See it as a signal that global order is changing. America is no longer dealing with an old hesitant India. It is dealing with an India that has $860 billion of export, $681 billion of forex reserves, 24,000 crore rupee transaction in a year, 1.46 lakh kilometers of national highway, 164 airports, 99% of mobile phones made domestically, rising defense export, massive consumer demands, and the confidence to say no when the deal is bad. That is the new India. Not perfect, not finished, not fully powerful yet, but moving, building, bargaining, and rising. And in a world where money decides morality, supply chains decide friendships, and markets decide respect, India is finally speaking the language the world truly understands, and that is business.